With a motion and a second,
Evan.
this is a Zoom meeting. I will ask for another roll call vote.
Arlington Heights,
Yeah.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
41st,
Yes.
Des Plaines, Hanover Park,
Yes.
Harwood Heights, Itasca, Mount Prospect, Norwich,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Rolling Meadows,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Wooddale, and School District 59.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, now on to the discussion items. We have a significant discussion on noise monitors, so I'll hand those 4 agenda items over to Ryan. Are you going to take those? We're going to hand those off to Baldana.
Donna's going to take the all of them on the noise monitors.
Baldana, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to start with the residential monitors as usual. There are 2 types of residential or portable noise monitors, residential and municipal. The residential monitors are available to residents for 2 week-long deployments. And since the last meeting, we have received 2 new requests. One of those came from Bensonville and one from Itasca. We have deployed the monitor to Bensonville. It's currently deployed, and the Itasca resident requested to wait until the air traffic volume goes back to normal or picks up again. So I'm going to check in with her later this month. We also have one pending deployment from March that's from a resident in Chicago who also requested to wait and see. She said she would call me when ready. The municipal monitor was most recently in Glenview. We have retrieved that monitor and issued a report on June 2nd. Ryan, can you pull up the long-term portable report? Thank you. The long-term portable monitor is located in Chicago Ward 39. That's Site D in North Park Village. And the average aircraft DNL for the month of April was 52.5. For May, it was 53, and for June, it was 52.4. All of these are down from, well, there's no data last year, but a couple of years ago as expected. Thanks, Ryan. And I'll talk a little more about this monitor in just a minute when I talk about the permanent noise monitors. Ryan, can you pull up the slides, please? So the CDA, along with our consultants at Landrum and Brown, has been updating the network of 36 permanent noise monitors. And next slide, please. Thank you. Of those, these updates were threefold. We were either upgrading all the hardware on existing monitors or removing existing monitors from utility poles, upgrading all the hardware as well, and then installing on a dedicated mast. Or we're also installing some brand new monitors, and those are designated as new locations. Next slide, please. So of the total of 36, we have already completed upgrades and relocations on 29 monitors. 17 of those were completed in a prior year, and 12 have been completed this year. Of those 12, 11 were upgrades, meaning just the hardware upgrades at these sites listed below. And then one of those was a relocation. There was a monitor, site 16 in Franklin Park, which was on utility pole, which we removed and installed on a dedicated mast. So that's the 29 that were completed, which leaves 7 to be completed. Next slide, please. So those 7 consist of 4 upgrades remaining to do this year, Des Plaines, Stone Park, Park Ridge, and Wooddale. And then we are also planning to complete 3 relocations this year, which are Site 7 in Des Plaines, Site 23 North Lake, and Site 28 in Schiller Park. And I will talk about these three a little more when I talk about new monitor installations. Next slide, please. So this is probably what you all are most excited about, the new installations. And I know this has taken a long time, but we're planning to complete this project this year. Of the 8 new permanent noise monitors that the City of Chicago initially committed to, we have already installed 4. Those are Site 42 in Chicago, which was done in 2016, Site 18 in Norwich, Site 31 in Bensonville, and Site 44 in Itasca, and those were all completed in 2018. So this leaves the first batch of 4 on the screen to complete the 8, which are 2 sites in Ward 39, Sites 38 and 39, Site 40 in Ward 40, and these are all Chicago wards, and Site 43 in Ward 41. In addition, there's an old Site 6 that was removed in 2011 at the property owner's request, and we're planning to replace this site with a new monitor, which would become Site 41 in Ward 41, the Norwood Park neighborhood. It will be in the vicinity of the old Site 6. And then also, in addition, we are planning to install 2 bonus monitors, one in Niles, Site 45, and one in Ward 39, which would be Site 46. And this monitor is supposed to replace the long-term portable Site D. So hopefully after this year, we will no longer have long-term portable monitors. All will be permanent. Next slide, please. So this tracking sheet is, it shows the 12-step process we have to complete for each of these installations. So on the left side, you see all the steps it takes, and then across the top are all the sites. The first batch of 7 on the left side are the new locations, so the brand new installations, and then the next 4 on the right side are relocations, meaning the ones that we are removing from utility poles and installing on dedicated masts. So for the group of 7 on the left, the new locations, Chicago Ward 39 is getting 3 monitors, and we have already met with Alderman Nugent. We also conducted a site visit with her, and we have confirmed 2 of the 3 sites. We are really close to confirming the 3rd site. And we have also met with Alderman Vasquez of Ward 40 and selected the site for Site 40 as well. So as soon as we confirm this location for Site 38, I will proceed with, I will request address assignment for all 4 sites, and then we will package that into one project and proceed with work as soon as the contractor paperwork is approved, which will be set in motion as soon as the address is assigned. Originally, we planned to bundle all Chicago monitors together, but there's a bit of a delay in scheduling a meeting with Chicago Ward 41. We have reached out to the alderman, but we were not able to schedule a meeting, still working on it. So if those 2 are confirmed in time, we can still bundle them together. But if not, we will proceed with the other 4 in Chicago, and then we will revisit these 2 as soon as we have the paperwork for them ready. Now, this leaves Niles on this list, which for which the site was also confirmed, and the address has been assigned, and also the license agreement was completed in April. We're just waiting to finalize this last step, or step number 4, license agreement for sites 7, 23, and 28, and then we'll bundle these 4 sites as well and treat them as one project. So for Site 7 in Des Plaines, 23 in North Lake, and 28 in Schiller Park, we have also confirmed and assigned addresses. And the license agreements were have been finalized. North Lake has been routed for signatures, and I'm packaging the agreements for Schiller Park and Des Plaines to distribute for signatures. So as soon as we have these agreements signed, the contractor procurement has already been set in motion. So as soon as we have the approvals in place and the license agreements in place, we can begin work on these 4 sites as well. And Franklin Park, as you can see, has already been completed. It was commissioned on March 6th. And that's all I have. The remaining of the slides will be covered by Ryan. Unless you have questions for me now, you can ask those now, or we can save them for after Ryan's portion.
Thank you, Valdana. Typically, 12-step programs are much more difficult to get through, so you're doing a great job.
Valdana, I have a question about the 39th Ward.
Yes.
You mentioned the temporary site at North Park Village. Will Site 46 just, will that be in the exact same spot, or is that moving to North Park neighborhood?
Yeah,
It's going to be, yes, go ahead.
yeah, I'll show
It's going to
that.
be nearby. Yeah, Ryan will show a map, but the current long-term portable is on a tripod on a roof of a building. We cannot install a permanent noise monitor on a roof because there is a concrete foundation. We are going to place it close to the existing location, just on the other side of Building K. But yes, like Ryan mentioned, he will show the map and go over that in a moment.
Okay, because your list showed it in North Park, which could have been North Park neighborhood. So it will stay in North Park Village then.
North Park Village, yes,
Right,
sorry.
okay. And another question, you mentioned that there was a request for a portable monitor from Chicago. Do you know where that was requested from? What neighborhood that was in?
I don't remember now, but I can provide that information. I can provide that information.
Okay.
And this was in March. I spoke with the homeowner a couple of times. She wasn't ready, and she said she would call me when she's ready. But yeah, I can provide the information.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? All right, Valdana, does that conclude residential portable monitors for you?
We just have
for
a few
me, yes,
slides.
but Ryan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a few slides to, I just want to go over general locations of all of these noise monitors, the new monitors that Valdana spoke of. Again, as she said, we are still finalizing the exact locations, specific locations, but we have the general areas that we are focusing on. And we had gone over this several years ago, but I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory. For the new permanent noise monitors in Chicago in Ward 39 here, we have our north site here and our south site, both of which the intent of these 2 locations is to capture arrival noise from aircraft on the south side for 10 Center, 28 Center, on 10 right, 28 left, if that's in use, but primarily south side arrivals, south airfield arrivals is the intent for Site 39. And Site 38 is north airfield arrivals, and more specifically with the new 9 Center, 27 Center arrivals that runway will be opening up this fall. And the intent of that monitor is to help capture noise from aircraft arriving on that runway. You also see Site D here. That is the long-term portable noise monitor in North Park Village. And as we mentioned, that site is just going to be moving, feet away from where it is physically located now to a location on the ground where we can put a permanent location in the ground. So it'll be still in North Park Village, just located on the ground as opposed to on the roof of the building. In Ward 40, we are looking in this area here, kind of north of Bryn Mawr, south of Peterson, to capture the existing 9 right, 27 left arriving aircraft, as well as for the new runway 9 Center, 27 Center arriving aircraft that'll begin this fall. That monitor is intended to capture aircraft noise from those 2 runways. And then Ward 41, Site 41, as Valdana mentioned, was is kind of a replacement for old Site 6 that used to be in this general location. So we are putting it a new monitor in that'll be on city property as opposed to private property in this location, and that's kind of directly in line with the 9 right 27 left center lines. So that'll capture arrival aircraft as well as departing aircraft in east flow for that site. Site 43 up here, that monitor is really intended to capture from the far north arriving airfield 9 left 27 right center line. And that site, again, along with 42 and 33, is intended to be along that arrival corridor for that runway, the north runway. And then we have Niles. So the village of Niles here, you can see it on the map. And we have our existing noise monitors in red. We also have Site 45, which will be the new permanent noise monitor in Niles. And you can see how its orientation relative to the airport. The real intent for this monitor is to capture east flow departures turning north, specifically off our north airfield, as the villages of Park Ridge, Niles, Chicago Ward 41, and others experience when we're in east flow, we have departures that take off and then turn to the north or back off to the west. This site, along with 24, is going to help capture noise from those operations. So that's the intent of Site 45. Are there any questions regarding the general location of any of the new monitors?
All right, seeing none of those graphics are helpful. I appreciate that. Do you guys have anything else on noise monitors?
That concludes item A.
All right, let's move on to item B, the Fly Quiet program for the Q2 2020 Fly Quiet report. Ryan?
Okay, so we have our second quarter 2020 Fly Quiet program report. I'm going to call this the COVID report. This is this Fly Quiet program report is really going to show how the Fly Quiet program operates with extremely low demand levels, and you're going to see some interesting metrics in here. Pages 1 through 3 again provides highlights and overview of the reports for the second quarter. Highlights for second quarter 2020 as far as flight quiet mode. And again, flight quiet mode is when the airport is able to operate in a configuration that requires at least one arrival and 1 or 2 departure runways, and they're able to use our preferential flight paths. And really that's driven on demand as opposed to a time period. And so we typically like to have that during nighttime hours, as FAA defines nighttime 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. But as this committee well knows, typically that flight quiet mode operates somewhere around 10:45 to 5:45 a.m. But with this report, you're going to see average start and stop times much closer to the 10 and 7 o'clock hour due to the extremely low demand we've seen in the second quarter for the months of April, May, and June. So the average start time for flight quiet in the second quarter was 10:13 p.m. And average stop time was 6:34 a.m., much earlier and later than we've ever shown before. Average time in flight quiet mode was 8 hours, so almost the full 9 hours of nighttime. And the average operations in flight quiet mode were 56, and that's about half of what we typically see. Typically, as you recall, we hover around 100 nightly operations in flight quiet mode. So we're looking at close to half of the number of operations. Page 2, at the top of page 2, we have highlights for runway use. We were primarily kind of in a west flow for departures, and our most nighttime departure runway was 28 right with 39%. On the arrival side, however, we were using an east flow runway, and that was 28 center with 35% of the arrivals. Departures kind of flip-flopped a little bit from first quarter 2020, primarily due to winds. Nighttime operations represent still around 11% of the overall daily operations, even though demands are down. That's both daytime and nighttime, so we're still hovering around 11% operations. and the percent of operations broken out by aircraft category. As you can see, in this case for nighttime, still dedicated cargo has crept up to about 57% of the total operations for nighttime. United American consists of 30%. Typically, that's much more, closer to 50% than we see normally. But during this time period with extremely low demand, cargo is still operating fairly robustly at O'Hare, while passenger demand is extremely down. And I'm going to go into that in much more detail with item D on today's agenda when I talk about the COVID impacts and where we're at today. Highlights for preferential flight tracks. Again, those are our flight tracks where we have vector headings to a specific heading that we use during flight quiet mode. And our metrics tell us how many of those flights occurred within less than a half a mile deviation from those flight tracks, half a mile to a mile or greater than a mile. And as you can see, we're close to 90% within a half a mile deviation, which is very good for the quarter. But again, we had extremely low demand. And once we get to the map, it'll be pretty clear that it was hopefully easy to achieve green for this quarter. Page 4. Page 4 is our nighttime hourly operations report for second quarter 2020. This breaks down the nighttime, our 9 hours of nighttime from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and what that looks like as far as demand for arrivals and departures for second quarter as well as the same quarter in the previous year. So when you're looking at this chart, you'll see predominantly the yellow bars and blue bars, but those are where we were last year as far as operations during the overnight hours. And you can see this year compared to last year how far below we are that with the red and green arrival and departure bars throughout the night. So again, because the demand was so low, we are able to start flight quiet mode much earlier. 10:13 p.m. was the average time with a stop time of 6:34 a.m. And again, that's driven, the start and stop times are driven by departure and arrival demands. You can see on the arrival side, the arrival bars start to pick up for our current quarter here, which drives the coming out of flight quiet mode. Again, so average flight time in flight quiet mode, almost the full 9 hours of nighttime and roughly 56 operations per night. Page 5 is our runway use report for nighttime for the second quarter. Again, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. As opposed to flight quiet mode. So during the nighttime hours, we saw predominant departures on 28 right at 39% when we're in west flow, and then when we're in east flow, 10 left, 29% of the departures. So primarily departures were concentrated on the south airfield with 28 right and 10 left in either east flow or west flow. On the arrival side, primary runway was 10 center, 28 center for both east and west flow, 35% in west flow, 34% in east flow. And again, we have had a lot of construction on the north airfield that drove a lot of closures for 9 right, 27 left. We've also had closures of 10 left, 28 right during the summer months for construction activity. So 10 center, 28 center has picked up a lot of the demand that those two runways due to closures, as well as during the overnight hours. Again, back to the previous page where I showed you cargo is over 50% of the operations. This runway, being a Group 6 runway, is able to handle the large wide-body aircraft being 200 feet wide. So a lot of that cargo activity, large cargo activity aircraft are having to use 10 center, 28 center during the overnight hours. Page 6 is the runway use specific to flight quiet mode as opposed to just nighttime. So this is when the airport is operating in flight quiet mode. And again, similar story, 28 right, 34% in west flow, 10 left, 27% in east flow when it comes to departures. And then again, on the arrival side, not much change here. 10 center, 28 center, doing the heavy lifting of arrivals during the overnight hours in flight quiet mode. Page 7 is our nighttime arrival summary report. So we provide a report for the 2 runways with the most arrivals for the quarter, and we list out all of the aircraft types, airlines that operate, that have operated on that runway during the quarter, and compare that to the previous year. As you can see at the bottom here, total arrivals on runway 10 center for the quarter were 962. Well below where we were at in 2019 for the same period. We list out all the airlines as well as passenger versus cargo. One of the things that stands out is all the passenger, dedicated passenger carriers are well below where they were at last year, whereas the cargo carriers are at or higher where they were last year. So cargo during the overnight hours has seen an uptick this year, specifically, and as my previous presentation on the COVID pandemic, we talked about how O'Hare has become a bit of a hub for a lot of the cargo supplies when it comes to medical supplies and other supplies related to this pandemic. O'Hare has really stepped up and taken a lot of the air traffic needed, essential air traffic needed for support as far as moving materials related to the pandemic. Runway 28 center, so the reciprocal, same piece of payment, just in the opposite direction. List of airlines that operated on the runway, number of arrivals for this quarter, as well as compared to the last year, same period. Again, well below where we were in 2019. And passenger traffic, well below where we were at. You know, here's American, well below the number of operations that we saw in the same quarter of 2019, whereas cargo traffic is at or above. You know, you can see operators like Nippon Cargo up, Korean Air Cargo up. So we're seeing the cargo carriers at or above where the passenger carriers are well below where we were. Now this is our nighttime preferential flight track summary report. This is a little different than the arrival report. So for this report, we provide for our 2 most used departure runways, not only the amount of departures, but as well as their average deviation from that runway's preferential flight track. So you can see here, we list all the airlines that operated during the quarter, the type, whether it be passenger or cargo, number of departures, and the average deviation in nautical miles from that preferential flight track. And as you can see for runway 10 left, although the operations were well below where we were in second quarter 2019, we saw a very good average deviation, well below ½ of a mile, most greens here with all the carriers. So very good adherence to our preferential flight track for this runway. Runway 28 right, so again, the same piece of pavement, just in the opposite direction. Again, showing the airlines, type of carrier, departures, average deviation in nautical miles for the quarter. Again, we're still well below the ½ mile deviation, mostly greens, some oranges, but a good adherence to the preferential flight track for 28 right for the quarter. And here's our flight track map. This is our nighttime departure track report. This shows all of the departure tracks and color-coded based on their deviation from the preferential flight tracks for the quarter. Now again, this is all the tracks, nighttime tracks for second quarter 2020. And those of you on this committee who have sat through the presentations that I've given over the years know that this is probably the least amount of tracks we've seen in a flight quiet report that I can remember. As you can see, the operation levels are extremely low. Another big difference here is typically we show the total departures and then we split it out by those in flight quiet mode and non-flight quiet mode. And you can see in this instance, the majority of operations occurred in flight quiet mode as opposed to outside of flight quiet mode, which is good. but that really is due to the low demand levels. On the bottom, we have the runways split out and the percentage of whether the deviation was within half a mile, under a half a mile to a mile, or over a mile. Majority of the runways were well within that half a mile deviation, which is good. We do have a few runways like forward left that the percentage was a little bit higher, but that is a small number. Again, our departures, again, were primarily this piece of pavement right here, 10 left and 28 right, and those two runways had good adherence to our preferential flight tracks.
Ryan, can you remind us why 10C, 28C shows up as not applicable?
I'm sorry, you cut off in the last part. 10 center, 28 center.
Why does it show up as not applicable?
So 10 center, 28 center, although it is being used at night, it does not have a preferential flight track. So
That's an
it
important
was,
thing to always remind ourselves. We're using it pretty heavily in fly
Yes.
quiet, but it is not a fly quiet runway.
yes. So this runway was commissioned after the creation of the current flight quiet program and is not included, and is, one of the main reasons why we are working on a new flight quiet program. So runways like 10 center, 28 center, 9 center, 27 center get considered in a future flight quiet program.
Thank you.
Page 12 is our nighttime noise complaint report for the quarter. As expected, our complaints are down, correlating with the low level of operations. One of the things that stands out to me is very little change in the number of households that are making complaints. Again, we track the verifiable households that use our complaint system, whether through website, app, or telephone. And as you can see, the number of households in April, May, and June are pretty stable, roughly almost the exact same amount. And then we also give the total amount of complaints for the quarter. But again, low 8,000 is on the low end as expected, but it's the same, not much fluctuation in the number of households that are complaining. Website, again, was the predominant method for complaints, over 97%, and aircraft noise, of course, was the predominant nature of noise complaints. Page 13 and 14 are our permanent noise monitor reports. Page 13 shows the physical location around the airport of our current 36 monitors. Again, hopefully soon we will be adding new red dots to this map with our new monitors that we spoke about previously. Page 14 is our nighttime aircraft noise report. This report uses the aircraft LEQ metric as opposed to what we see in our monthly ANAMS reports, where we use the day-night average sound level metric, because we're just looking at nighttime. LEQ is the appropriate metric to use. So here we have all of our levels for second quarter 2020 for all 36 monitors. And as expected, all are well below where we were at this same period last year. Again, green represents a decibel or more from the same period, and all the monitors are at or well below those levels for second quarter 2019. Page 15 is our airline ground run-up report. So we have our ground run-up enclosure located in the central kind of north airfield here, which was recently moved to accommodate construction of runway 9 center, 27 center. This report breaks out adherence to use of the ground run-up enclosure 24 hours a day, not just during nighttime. Run-ups are done at any time during the day. So we report on all of those. And we report those that use the GRE and those that use locations outside of the GRE. Obviously, our preference is that all carriers use the ground run-up enclosure for their ground run-ups. For second quarter 2020, we saw 98% adherence to the ground run-up enclosure, which is fantastic. But again, that's taken with the fact that we're still well below operations that we were previously. And although the flight operation levels are down, this also translates to maintenance operations being down as well. So we have fewer run-ups, but at least the run-ups that are occurring predominantly are occurring within the ground run-up enclosure, which is what we want to see. We break those out by the major carriers that use the ground run-up enclosure. As you can see, American, close to 100% use, United, 100% use for this quarter, which is really good to see. The page 16 is our aircraft ground-up report, broken out by the actual aircraft types that are doing run-ups at the airport in the second quarter. As you can see, the predominant types of aircraft are the narrow bodies or aircraft types, and so, or regional jets here. So we have the ERJs and the CRJs doing the majority of the run-ups, as well as the Boeing 737, and really good adherence to using the GRE. Almost 100% of them occurred within the GRE, which is what we want to see. And that concludes the second quarter 2020 Flight Quiet program report.
Thank you, Ryan. I think if the cause wasn't so tragic, and if there weren't 170,000 dead Americans, we would say victory. We did it. ONCC Tech. We've got the perfect Flight Quiet report for Q2, but unfortunately, that's not the case. With that, I think it's also important to realize that this is kind of a black swan event. So we're going to create we're having outliers occur before our eyes, which will obviously impact future averages. So when we look at the 12-month average 12 months from now, we'll be inputting this data. So it's going to skew things for the foreseeable future. I think it's going to be important for us to keep in mind when we look at this data going forward. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ryan? You guys are a quiet bunch today. We'll get more into the COVID impacts in D, but I'll hand it back to you, Ryan, for aircraft noise comparisons.
Okay. So we have updated the O'Hare aircraft noise comparison exhibit, and some of you may remember this exhibit. It's been a long time since we've updated it. I think the last update was done in 2015 or 16. But the intent of this exhibit is to show the current fleet of aircraft that are operating at O'Hare, what their noise impact is as far as how each specific aircraft type, the level of noise it creates, and rank them by the size of their aircraft noise footprint, as well as the number of operations at O'Hare. So this exhibit, we have the top 20 aircraft operating at O'Hare. We only do the top 20 because they represent well over 95% of the operations at the airport. We have ranked these based on 2019 average daily operations. So this is all pre-COVID average daily operations. And the first page, they are ranked by footprint area of noise contour. So we do this committee should be familiar with now the LMAX contour. We've been using that in Flight Quiet Committee. We use a LMAX contour that we model in the Aviation Environmental Design Tool, ADT, which all of you should be familiar with as well. Previously, this exhibit used INM to generate these contours. We're using ADT now. And let me zoom in here. But basically what this is it models a single departure for the specific aircraft type, as well as a single arrival. And we have a 65 LMAX as well as a 75. The 65 is the larger light blue, and the 75 is the smaller LMAX contour. Okay, and so then we rank those by average daily operations, as well as footprint area. So on this first page, the footprint area is where we're ranking. And so the loudest aircraft operating at O'Hare is the Boeing 747. Specific model is the 800, as well as the 400. You can see the top kind of loudest aircraft are all wide bodies, really, that operate at O'Hare. It's really not till we get to the Embraer 190 here on the top row that we see a non-wide body, and also the Boeing 737. And then the rest of them are smaller narrow body and regional jet aircraft. Page 2 then resorts that based on which aircraft type are operating the most at O'Hare. And as you can see, the Boeing 737 has by far the most average daily operations in 2019. So this is the aircraft type that's operating the most. And then with this resort, you can see those louder wide bodies then dump to the bottom here. And our 747-800 really only consists of 0.6% of the total operations at O'Hare. So these kind of loud guys down here, although they are our loudest aircraft types, they do, you can see, I change this back to the footprint area sort. You can see the percentages on the top, what percentage of the operations they really take. So again, this exhibit, we intend to update, we'd like to update every year for you and give this committee some idea of, now that the MD-80 is no longer operating at O'Hare. That's an aircraft type that we've been touting for a long time. You've heard me speak about it a long time. MD-80 is the loudest airplane. That has now been phased out and gone. So if this committee is looking at other aircraft types to focus on, this chart is a good starting place to start talking about that.
And that 787 is just kind of phenomenal for how quiet it is for such a big aircraft.
It is, and those who you know, have a chance to stand under it when it flies over, it's pretty amazing the size of the aircraft and how quiet it is.
And then did you not include some just because the volume's so low? Like obviously the A380 started flying into O'Hare,
Yeah.
but very occasional, so it's not on here.
Again, so we only included the top 20 aircraft that operate, which consist of over 95% of the fleet that operate. But we're happy to do one-offs if members are interested in seeing.
I don't think it's necessary. Now, just relating this back to Fly Quiet, I believe for alternative B, you're using the LMAX for a single aircraft type. Is that this 737?
Yes, so we are using pretty much for this aircraft type, the Boeing, which is the most common aircraft type operating at the airport, the Boeing 737-800. So for our LMAX contours, we decided that at least for discussion, it makes sense to use that aircraft type. Now, you know, others may say, well, we need to use the loudest, or we need, you know, the other factors. There's merits to the argument, but during the overnight hours, Boeing 737-800 has historically been the most used aircraft type. So that's what we use. And not to cause any further confusion, but in this chart, we use the LMAX 65 and 75 LMAX contours. For Fly Quiet, we are using the 70, which is kind of like an in-between of those two extremes. So just keep in mind that if you were to look at the contours in the Fly Quiet alternatives, they may not exactly match up for what you're seeing here, because it's it would be an in-between contour than what you're seeing here in this exhibit.
All right, Ernie, can I give the floor to you? You have a question?
Thanks, Evan. Hey, Ryan, I have a question.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, put the 74-8s back up on the noise contour and the footprint. Are those Rolls-Royce engines, just out of curiosity? Do we know? I mean, why is the footprint so large?
Oh, okay. So why is the footprint so large? So really, what's driving that for the Dash 8 is the size of the aircraft. It's a huge airframe, and it has a much different arrival profile than its earlier counterpart, the 400.
Okay.
As you can see,
that's actually, I hate to interrupt you. That's actually my question. This isn't power plant noise, right? It's airframe noise.
Well,
Right.
well, this considers
It's a
both.
combination, right? I get it, but it's part of the fact of just the size of the aircraft.
It's part of the size of the aircraft, but also just its arrival profile and how the engines are used on its arrival that are driving that very extended contour.
Just for what it's worth, being an A&P guy, okay, for what do you think he's pulled back to on final? Is he at 50? I mean, is he at 40? I mean, what would you guess? I hate to put you on the on the stump, but
I'm not going to guess.
What do you think when he's shooting the approach, so we can tell a constituent, right? It's not just the power plant, it's also the airframe, right?
That is correct, yes. And it's a large, very large airframe in the air with a lot of air resistance on it.
But what do you think when this guy's shooting, or she, not to be sexist, but if they're shooting final approach and they're on final and they've turned base and now they're on a 3% glide slope, what do you figure the power plant's at? Is it 40? I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know. I'm not that smart.
Ernie, I think
good questions.
Ask that question.
Yeah, good questions. I don't have a specific answer for you.
I you know what? I think
I think Ernie, I can, I'm happy to get specific answers for you.
I think we should know. I mean, really, I think we ought to know what's that power plant at when because he's landing over Evan. He's not landing over me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll take that as a to do and maybe get some more information on, arrival profiles and
I appreciate it.
How the aircraft operates.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you, Ernie. Very detailed question, and we're at tech, and that's what we're looking for. So thank you. Ryan, do you have anything else on the aircraft noise comparison?
I do not.
I think this is a helpful chart, and we look forward to it being updated annually, so we can take a look at it. Let's move on to the updates of impacts on the airport due to COVID-19. I asked this to be included. Like I said, I think this is one of the most important, most impactful things that's ever happened to aircraft noise or airport noise. And I think it's very important for us to understand what's actually going on and what's driving these numbers. So I'll give it to Ryan for just a discussion point.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And again, I'm really happy to present this material because it is really informative and important. And I brought this to committee previously. We have some updates for you, so I'm not just resharing kind of the same information. Obviously, we're well into this now. We have some more data, so I want to kind of show you where we were and where we're at as far as the impacts to the aviation system. So you'll remember this slide previously. This is our system shock graph and recoveries, and it shows historically all of what we refer to as aviation system shocks that have caused significant impacts to the aviation industry over the years, going back to the early 70s. And you can see here the 2020 COVID outlook where we're at. Previously, and this kind of chart doesn't really do that good of a job of looking at the outlook because we are still kind of in a crystal ball scenario here where we're mid-20s. The impact has been significant. How long it's going to take to get back to where we were in 2019 is still a bit of a guess. What I can say is at this point, our outlook is much more pessimistic than what we were a few months ago because the containment of the virus has not been as robust as we had hoped it would be at this point in the summer. So we are still kind of seeing that recovery push back to where we were at. We are, of course, there will be a recovery and we will get back to operation levels that are, kind of where we were at robust operation levels in 2019. It's just a question of how long that will be. And that is really driven by how people feel safe to travel again, using air travel again. And that's kind of the big question that is hard to answer. So this next slide is our national traveler volume. So this is basically just the amount of people flying. The yellow bar is 2020 and the red bar is 2019. You can see that kind of steady up and down throughout the year. Red traveler volume where we were in 2019. And of course, here's the COVID pandemic dip well into April, where we bottomed out in April. And we have seen a recovery since then into the summer months. We are trending upwards as far as passenger volumes. I will say that this summer trend upwards is really driven by leisure travel. Those feeling safe enough and wanting to do some summer travel plans. These are really our leisure flyers here. These are not business travelers, which the business traveler is really the meat of the aviation market. The leisure traveler here has done some flying over the summer, and so we are seeing an uptick in number of passengers through the summer, which is a good sign. Looking at O'Hare specifically, of course, the red is 2019 and yellow is 2020. The operation levels that we've seen over the summer, again, bottomed out in April and May as far as the percent below where we were in 2019. And again, we have seen an uptick here in the summer months, primarily driven by the leisure traveler. So there is a good indication that we may plateau here and possibly start to dip down again as those leisure travelers, we get into the fall months and there's less of a demand for that. And again, that business traveler isn't really filling that demand yet. Midway is a little bit of a different story, and I'll get to that as to why that is. You can see 2019 versus 2020, again, the dip bottom out in April and then a steady uptick through the summer months. So we were 60, almost 65% below where we were in 2019. We're now roughly around 32%. That has really been driven by Southwest, and more specifically Southwest's, the people who fly Southwest, the leisure traveler. And so Southwest flies into smaller markets. The smaller markets for summer travel season, there has been a demand for that. And they have seen an uptick in number of passengers wanting to fly this summer. This gives a little bit of a better idea of the type of air carriers and the impact that this pandemic has had. I haven't shown this chart before, but I wanted to show you just to give you a sense of, we have, kind of different types of air carriers, and the Americans and the Uniteds here are predominant. These are, Delta, American, United are the big boys. These are the ones that operate the majority of air traffic in the country. And as you can see, their bookings, or basically comparing the number of scheduled flights between June 15th and current compared to last year, we're almost, well below half of where they were last year. JetBlue being over 70% below where they were last year. But as we get closer on the other side, where we look at the low-cost carriers, such as Southwest, you can see the impact is not as great. Their demographic is more the leisure traveler, and they have had so far not as significant of a hit as American, United, and Delta has. Allegiant, I have this on the graph. It's a little bit misleading. Allegiant has seen an uptick in scheduled flights. They actually started new service out of Midway in the middle of the pandemic in March. But again, Allegiant is a very small percentage of the overall number of flights in the system. Allegiant also operates to their business model really is targeting the leisure traveler and also operating out of smaller airports or airports that are not in large metropolitan areas. So they, as far as their scheduled flights, have not had as significant as a hit as some of the other big carriers have. And of course, the what I've talked about in the Flight Quiet report, we have seen a bit of a leveling out of passenger demand operation levels. So these are on the left side, O'Hare passenger specific operations versus cargo operations. As you can see, we bottomed out, and then we're starting to see an uptick in the summer months for passenger air carriers. However, the cargo demand has steadily increased, and we are continuing to see an increase as the cargo demand. There's still demand for cargo, as I've spoke to before, and more specifically out of O'Hare. So we are still seeing cargo operations at or above where we were and continuing to increase. So that does kind of help weather the storm a bit as far as economics goes. But you can see the bulk of the operations at O'Hare are dedicated passenger, and we're still well below where we were last year. So that's kind of the update of where we are as far as the impacts of the pandemic. Again, like as I mentioned at the beginning, my previous update, you know, we were kind of in the middle of the bottoming out. We have seen an uptick over the summer months due to summer travel, but the outlook is a bit pessimistic because the virus still is not contained. We don't have a vaccine, and the leisure traveler is probably going to slow down this fall, and so we're going to see kind of a dip down again probably when it comes to operations.
Brian, we've got a question from Brian. With reductions, are airlines reducing more of the numbers of mainline aircraft or regional aircraft?
That's a good question. Mainline is definitely, they're kind of operating in the middle road. You know, the larger aircraft, that becomes which aircraft types are economically feasible to operate. And it's a complex calculation based on what load factors they can get, how much the cost is to operate that aircraft type. Some narrow bodies and large bodies are more expensive to operate than some regional jets. And then also some regional jets are more expensive to operate than narrow bodies. So it really depends on the contracts the airlines have, you know, the types of aircraft they fly, and the economics of it. So I can't say there's really one specific aircraft type that, you know, they're not looking to fly or are looking to fly. It really depends. It's airline specific.
Ernie, you got a question?
Yeah, just a question, Ryan. I'm curious, of that chart that you showed of the cargo flights, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of those do we think actually used to be passengers? Right? In other words, they've converted it, right?
Sure.
And they've made them into cargo flights, and they're stuffing all the cargo they can find because, for obvious reason, it's revenue. But do we have any indication of how many of those used to be passenger jets?
Off the cuff, I don't. That's something we can look at. You know, we're able to kind of drill down as best we can, identify those aircraft that are typically assigned as passenger flying dedicated cargo.
It's because the number is so alarming, right? I mean, you know, you showed these two graphs, right? And passengers have fallen off the planet, and cargo has gone up. I got to assume that some of those planes are now being dedicated to and we know they are, right? I mean, just by obvious.
I mean, of course, the airlines, you know, don't, if they can make money off their airplanes, you know, they will. So if there's an opportunity to do that, I'm sure they're taking advantage of it. I do want to point out and just make sure it's clear, these charts are a little bit misleading. You know, the operations per day, you can see on the passengers, we're talking, you know, 2,500 is our typical, and dedicated cargo, you know, this is still like, you know, 60 operations a day to 100. So it's still a small percentage or a percentage of the total operations, but the trend is there, that cargo is increasing while passengers are decreasing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, Evan, can I ask a question?
No.
Thanks. Um, so understanding that a lot of our funding sources are fixed for right now, are there concerns about some of the long-term funding implications for things like the residential sound installation or even like the CDA's budget, with kind of this concern about how quickly the recovery will go?
I'll let Mr. Frame take that, but just before he does, I will say we have funding, as far as the residential program, we have funding locked in right now for the homes, for the OMP, so that is not impacted, but I'll let Aaron speak to that.
Mr. Frame?
Morning, everyone. Kieran, yes, let's talk about residential sound first. So the funding sources we have are dedicated for residential sound that cannot be used for anything else. So we have specific FAA grants for sound installation. We have PFC authority for sound installation, and then we have bonds, airport bonds that we use for sound installation. And those are not interchangeable for other projects. In order to do that, particularly for things that are approved by the FAA, like grants or PFCs, they would undergo a different review and obviously require papering up. So everything for residential sound is dedicated. I think on the larger issue of airport finance, yes, that is a concern. Because passenger volumes are down, there's a lot of revenue that we're not collecting, whether it's parking or concessions or retail. So it's no secret that many of the airports across the country have applied for CARES Act funding in order to help offset those lost revenues. So just different situations. I think general finance continues to be a concern, but we're very fortunate to have received CARES Act grants for both O'Hare and Midway. But residential sound is a dedicated funding source, and so that's not a concern.
I think it's a great question. I think it's more macro than that as well, though, too. It's not just CDA that we're worried about, or even the airlines that we're worried about. It's all the jobs that O'Hare supports. I look at my industrial district, and my businesses are here because of the airport. And if the airport's not functioning, those are real jobs that are on the line. So I think it's something we need to keep an eye on, and we need to brace for. So thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the COVID impacts? I know we've got a question from our member from Palatine unrelated to this.
It's Brian from, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
It's Brian from Norwich. This is just an observation. I obviously live in Norwich. I'm about 1,000 feet south of 28th Center. And in West Flow, I notice on weekend days, there's no noise over Norwich, but I can see all the planes landing maybe over 27 left. And I'm thinking, wow, this is just like Fly Quiet. We were talking about splitting the airport. Is this just a coincidence because there's fewer flights on the weekend? Or is it something that air traffic may be trying to do, since there's fewer flights, so they can shift all the flights to one side of the airport or the other?
That's a good question. I do know there's significant construction activity happening on the South Airfield that's resulting in some daytime and possibly even weekend, closures. We also have, because low demand levels, the airport does get into some days, like even on the weekends, where it only needs one runway to operate departure and one arrival. And so the need for spreading out, on different runways is not there. So, but that's something we can look at as far as on the weekends, which runways are they using and why. But specific to why they're using North Airfield versus South Airfield, I think it may be a combination of demand and airfield activities that are driving that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Evan, Frank here from Chicago 41.
Mr. Ickes, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I guess I can direct this to the CDA. Given the overwhelming evidence that we have now that reducing nighttime operations by approximately 50 operations gives us a significant reduction in nighttime noise. And the goal of the ONCC has for years been reduce noise and in general nighttime noise lately. Is the CDA willing to consider doing something, and I keep going back to the same dog here, vis-a-vis enticing airlines to reduce 25 to 50 operations at night. And by doing so, we can achieve a tremendous benefit for the entire airport community and surrounding residential communities. Aaron, would you be willing to present this to the commissioner and try to find a permanent method of reducing the nighttime operations by about 50%?
Frank, I'll go ahead and mention it to the commissioner. I don't think that that's very likely, but I'll mention it.
Well, it's an obvious solution to this whole predicament we have of nighttime noise. I mean, everyone is sleeping better at night. It's all for the wrong reasons, obviously.
Frank,
But-
well, I think we've spoke to this quite a bit, and maybe it'd be helpful if we get you some more information in writing. But it is against federal law for the airport to try and restrict demand, and so we can give you more information on the Airport Noise and Capacity Act, the federal law that prohibits that action, and some more information on why the city is not able to influence demand.
Well, I'm not looking for punitive actions against the airlines.
I'm talking about any actions at all that would influence or prohibit aircraft from operating during specific hours. So again, this is a topic that's been discussed quite a bit in this committee and other committees, and there's a lot of information out there that I think can help answer your question, and we will give that to you.
I would like to see that, or at least point me in a direction where it is. Thank you.
I, for one, would love to have airport noise back if it would stop the global pandemic. That's just a market indicator for me. We do have a question on noise monitors, and are noise monitors on a regular maintenance program, and how long is the average life of a noise monitor? I don't know if that's Vildana, Ryan, or Aaron.
I'll take that. That's a good question. Our noise monitors are constantly being maintained. We have a subcontractor, Berry Technologies, they're sole dedicated to maintaining these monitors. They undergo regular maintenance throughout the year. The lifespan of a monitor is a very good question, and one I can't say it's specifically, but I will say that we've had monitors that we're replacing that are well over 25 years old that have been operating flawlessly for some time. So it really depends on the environment that the monitor is in, the type of maintenance it receives regularly as far as the lifespan. But we've had monitors operating, without issue for years.
All right.
But that being said, all of our monitors will be almost kind of brand new. After this year, we'll have all new equipment and all these monitors, which is a good thing. So new technology and new monitors to replace some of this outdated equipment that's reaching the end of its lifespan, I should say.
All right, thank you for that. Moving along, the next ONCC Tech Committee will be held on September 15th. Chairwoman Jurasek has indicated she wants all ONCC meetings to continue on Zoom platform for the foreseeable future. I think that is a wise decision on her part, and we can't get the full ONCC together even for an in-person meeting as long as we're in phase 4. So that's what we'll continue to do. Now I'll entertain comments from ONCC members. All right, comments from the audience. Mr. Dwyer.
Yes, thank you. First question is on the permanent noise monitors. With CDA's update that they were anticipating completion this year, do they anticipate prior to the runway opening November 5th?
I'll go ahead and go. Hi, Dan. Yes, that's the goal. I don't know if we'll hit all of them, but that's certainly the goal.
And is there a drop dead date from the aldermen where you would need a site selection to be able to achieve that?
There is no drop dead date. The time is near because there are so many steps as Vildana has described. Just choosing the location is step one, and getting an address assigned is step two. So because we need to go through the procurement process and make sure that the scope is clear and the contractor gets to prepare a quote, get that approved, I would say that we've got a few more weeks left in order to finalize those site selections in order to try to get it installed before November 5th.
Okay. From my perspective, it might be worth mentioning this runway's opening in a West Flow month. So those arrivals over the east side of the airport are going to be prevalent, and whether that imparts some urgency on their decision that this is very relevant, particularly to the North Airfield, to get these in and not have to answer to constituents as to, whether this was held up because of their indecision.
Okay, thank you.
And just another comment, if I could. The public comment period for Fly Quiet on Thursday has been amended to only allow questions to be submitted in advance. And I was wondering if that's going to be the change of policy to this committee and all committees moving forward.
That was something that Mayor Jurasek had requested to be placed on the agenda, and it's been in there since the June 5th ONCC meeting. Not necessarily if people have questions, of course, we're able to answer them in the comment period.
Okay, so the public comment period, that's an opportunity to submit in advance. You aren't precluded from commenting after the meeting.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. That's all.
All right, we had a question on the Wooddale monitor. It looks like Ryan was able to answer that. Now we have a question from Representative Schakowsky's office. Can you clarify how many new noise monitors will be in Congresswoman Schakowsky's district? And it looks like Ryan's handling.
Sorry, I answered that directly, but yeah, we'll get that number directly to you.
All right. Do we have any other questions from the public? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Move so.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, because of the new OMA rules, we've got to do this by roll call vote. So, Jeanette, can you please do the painstaking task of slowly adjourning this meeting?
Yes. Arlington Heights,
Yes.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
41st Ward, Des Plaines,
Yes.
It was a yes
Hanover
from
Park?
41.
thank you.
Yes from Chicago 41. I'm sorry, I was muted.
Hanover Park,
Yes.
Itasca,
Yes.
Norwich,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Rolling Meadows, Schaumburg,
Yes.
Wooddale, and School District 59.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. I thank everyone for their time and the commitment you all have to this committee. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye. Okay.